Hello to all you other Codys, and also not Codys, and future Codys of the world. Please open your faces and take in this glorious news, but only some of it, because it's some of the news. Just a spoonful of news for you today, little fella. It's a tad bitter, sure, but it's kind of sweet. You know, it'll help you get big and strong. I hope you're very excited, because today we're going to talk about that time that our president, as in the President of the United States, which is a country in the world, wondered aloud if you could inject disinfectant into your body to stop a global pandemic.
Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me.
There's the full clip, complete with context, that we will now quickly break down, because apparently that needs to be done. So the first part was Trump talking about how UV light can work as a disinfectant to viruses, a thing that is true. He then asked about whether or not you could inject UV light into the body, which, while sounding weird, isn't that outlandish either, and is a thing people are working on right now. So far, everything is squarely on the rails, or at least as much on the rails as we can ever hope these days. Then came the moment his breathy garbage maw primed the prickly little tongue inside and gooped out the following collection of words. And then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute. 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that? By injection inside, or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets in the lungs, and it does a tremendous number on the lungs. So it would be interesting to check that. So that you're going to have to use medical doctors with. But it sounds interesting to me. And for the full context, his comments came immediately after DHS official Bill Bryan spoke specifically about how both bleach and isopropyl alcohol will get rid of the virus in minutes, meaning that he is very much referring to those chemicals. Again, all right there in the video and the White House transcript. That's, what he said. You can look it up. The context very clearly being that Trump heard about how it's possible to use UV light to internally treat coronavirus, and then heard that disinfectants like bleach also kill viruses, and then wondered aloud if you could also inject disinfectant the way you could inject the UV light. Now, we could talk all day about how incredible it is that an adult human, let alone a president human, might be so profoundly f***witted as to earnestly wonder if injecting disinfectant could stop someone from being sick. Which some experts believe might be wrong, maybe. Good God. Good freaking God, New York Times. You are embarrassing. Failing New York Times. So, yeah, we could talk about how it was both depressing and shocking, but also not at all surprising to hear. And then back to depressing again when you realize that it really was not that surprising after all. But we know all that. You know, we're past all the gloom and the grim reality that the country is being led by the human equivalent of a racist dish sponge. And this video isn't actually about that. What I do want to talk about is what happened next. A beautiful window of time that, when you step outside of yourself, was honestly quite funny. Not like joke funny, but maybe the dark, absurd funny you'd get from watching a bear maul and devour a ska band. You know, burps out one of their little plaid hats. Because if you remember, and you do remember, the president later clarified his statement, saying this.
No, I was asking a question sarcastically to reporters like you, just to see what would happen. But I was asking a very sarcastic question to the reporters in the room about disinfectant on the inside. But it does kill it, and it would kill it on the hands, and that would make things much better. That was done in the form of a sarcastic question to the reporters.
Ah! So he was being sarcastic by asking if you could inject disinfectant, but also wanted to say that it does kill it on the hands and that would make things much better? Like, it's weird that he added that as if he's just learning what disinfectant does. But okay, I guess the president, during a pandemic, wanted to crack a few dry zingers during a press conference on how to treat the virus. Like a real Jim from The Office, you know? Clearly, what we need right now from president of country. But also, very clear that he was being earnest and then tried to backtrack. But whatever, Daria, cool joke. Did you sarcastically rage quit your briefings after this too? Because everyone knows that when you take your ball and then go home with your ball, well, that means you're the cool, totally not mad winner of the ball. So this second "I was being sarcastic to freak the normies out" comment happened on April 24th during a signing ceremony at noon. Now, his initial totally sarcastic and not clearly earnest comments about injecting disinfectant into human beings' bloodstreams happened the day before at around 5 p.m. You know how he gets jokey when he's tired? But what that created was an amazing 19 or 20 hour window of time. Time that we will never get to experience again, or will, when something like this happens on the day we release this video, when Trump supporters and online conservative grifters had to figure out a way to justify why the president would suggest injecting disinfectant that wasn't just because he's a cascading garbage fire. In this amazing span of time, we got a front row ticket to the Cirque du Soleil of mental gymnastics. Just a real parade of clowns twisting logic like they were balloon animals. It's one of the few pleasures that we can glean from Trump. The fact that he is so overtly bad in everything he says and does that the act of pretending otherwise regularly exposes frauds who might have been accidentally respected under different circumstances. He's a real magnifying glass for blatant self-denial. For both sides, actually, and we'll certainly get to that. But first, the juice you love. The love juice. The folks who positively lost their minds to defend the president, usually in one of three very smart ways, which was to either, 1, pick apart the semantics of what Trump said versus what critics said, 2, to focus entirely on the wrong part of Trump's comments, or 3, just create an elaborate new narrative behind Trump's words, like he was a pet goldfish they're desperately anthropomorphizing. And naturally, we'll start with Breitbart and Daily Wire, the cream of the news crop, in that they're both super white and bad for your health. Both of these sites argued that, no, dummies, here's a fact check for you. Trump didn't literally instruct Americans to drink bleach or inject disinfectant, like a couple people said on Twitter. He just wondered if maybe perhaps medical doctors look into his idea to inject Americans with disinfectant after someone specifically talked about bleach. But it technically isn't the same thing as the president instructing Americans to inject bleach. Ha! We won the word battle. Like, this whole argument is that since a few people on the internet used the words drink bleach instead of asked if doctors could look into injecting disinfectants right after bleach was brought up, that it means it's all fake news, folks. It's a frustratingly common tactic from a whole brand of big brain debate people on the internet who think that you can wordplay your way through an argument like a scrappy knight solving a Minotaur's riddle. Here's Rush Limbaugh, incidentally the Daily Wire's founder's childhood hero, going a step further and saying, "No, you idiots! Trump didn't tell people to drink Drano or Lysol." And, yeah, Rush, I guess you're right. He's specifically talking about how Nancy Pelosi used the term Lysol to mock Trump. To mock him, as in a joke about his comments, as a mock. Because often, and I don't know if you know this, Rush, people will use colorful and often exaggerated wording to insult someone. Like, if I said that your transparent attempt at deflection by purposefully not understanding what jokes are was sadder than watching a dog try to ride a bike, then, well, I'm not actually being accurate, because it's not actually sadder than that. Dogs deserve bikes too, Rush. This is the bottom barrel of the discourse. People who, when backed into a corner, tried to be as painfully obtuse as possible about the stupidity of and clear consequences behind Trump's words, despite the very obvious fact that his supporters have already shown to be dangerously susceptible to them. Trying to argue that it's totally overblown because Trump didn't literally tell people to inject chemicals is painfully disingenuous, when there's an entire subgenre of conservatives who think our president is slipping people Willy Wonka clues about a deep state conspiracy. Speaking of Rush being a baby, let's talk about Ben Shapiro, the Rush baby. Oh boy, hi Ben! How are you holding up during the pandemic? I'm sure your family is thrilled to have you around the house, totally destroying things. Ben did pretty great in the number 2 section of Defending the President, which was to focus on entirely the wrong part of why people were upset. While the amateurs were defending the UV light comments that Trump made as if that was the thing we were all concerned about, Ben was like, "Nah, kids, watch how a real man does it," and then proceeded to roleplay an entirely new reality that no one was even thinking about. He sure Narnia'd us, that Ben, by tweeting that while the president sure did wonder about injecting chemicals, it's not like he's going to make that policy or anything. It's a pretty beautiful one-man argument where he cleverly pointed out that no, there won't be a disinfectant injecting law made, the thing we were all worried about. You remember all those tweets from people saying, "Wow, I can't believe it, Trump is going to make this policy." And Democrats freaked out, and we're all like, "We will block this new bleach drinking law the president clearly said he was going to do." And then Ben was coolly like, you triggered, you libs? I bet you didn't know that if you listen closely, the president didn't say he would make bleach drinking a policy. Way to prove us all wrong, Ben! You get all of the prizes. Ben also went balls first into our final method of denial when he tweeted that Trump was actually just playing a single-person game of telephone where he processed information out loud for us to hear, and that we shouldn't take anything he, the president, says out loud with his mouth too seriously. Because you know how all great presidents should be graded on a curve, and Ben has definitely given past presidents this kind of leeway when judging what they say? Like the defense that Trump isn't so bad if you only half listen to all the things he says is I guess technically true. The same way the Transformers films are a beautiful work of cubist art if you squint while watching them. And again, I'd like to remind you that all of these sad conjectures that Trump definitely didn't actually suggest injecting disinfectant into yourself, it all ended with Trump coming out and saying that, he totally said that and was being sarcastic. Because sometimes the world is perfect. And yet, this is all but a delicious meal to the sugary dessert, the erotic foreplay to the noisy blasting of the genitals that is this wonderful 24-hour span of time. Because do you remember Dilbert? That bald guy with all the tumors on his head who hung out with a talking egg? Well, he was drawn by someone, and that person was named Scott Adams. And you don't have to remember that name or pay much attention to it after this, but Adams is one of the funniest people on Twitter right now when it comes to the absolute denial of objective reality. You know how people like Elon Musk and Neil deGrasse Tyson are really smart and successful about one or two specific things, and then assumed that meant they were smart and successful about everything? And it was kind of funny, but also a little bit of a bummer considering that they have a lot of followers and power. Well, Scott Adams is like that, in that he has a lot of followers and thinks of himself as some kind of intellectual. But the one thing he was successful about was drawing basic shapes to form characters for Sunday morning comics. And that's not nothing, but also close to nothing? Isn't that right, Mr. Reverend Wiggle Bum Bum Cigarettes? I didn't do the work in post. Sorry about that. Future Cody. Hey, there's no time for you anymore. You're done here. Get out. You're ugly. Anyway, at some point, One assumes Scotto started reading a bunch of power of persuasion type books, then figured that was enough qualification to write one himself. The first words of his Amazon biography describes him as a trained hypnotist and a lifelong student of persuasion. And that's kinda all you need to know about Dilbert's dad, you know? I don't need to sell you on Scott Adams being a grifter clown, but he's just really fun to blast. Like, listen to him completely misunderstand what it means to be influential or persuasive.
One of the biggest traits of a master persuader is that they don't get embarrassed. Imagine if you were an ordinary person and you went on TV and you answered a question and you just got savaged by your critics. Like how you don't know anything, your numbers don't add up, just, you're dumb, you're a fraud, you just got savaged. What do you do if you're a normal person? Well, you retreat into your shell, you get out of politics, you become less effective, you become tentative, you become nervous in public, you try to avoid questions, you become worse. What happens if you're a master persuader? You say to yourself, that didn't work as well as the next thing I'm going to try. All right, I'll try something else. But by the way, I got a ton of attention. Everybody's talking about me.
Boy, is that telling. So, according to Scott, one of the traits of a master persuader is the inability to be embarrassed, which also happens to be the same trait as a shameless narcissist. That's how weird. How weird and telling that you think a person who feels bad about criticism becomes worse, and that the real brain champions ignore it when an overwhelming number of people say you're wrong and a fraud. How weird. Now, I could do an hour-long video documenting every time Scott Adams said a dumb grifter thing, but honestly, he's just not worth the time and would think all the attention means he's winning some game of 3D chess, which, by the way, is a thing he coined when praising Trump back in 2015. Like, whenever people sarcastically talk about Trump playing 4D chess, because it's such a dumb idea, that was actually Scott's term that he unironically believes. He correctly predicted that Trump would win in 2016. And because of that one right guess about something that had two possible outcomes, has doubled down his entire reputation on the theory that Trump is secretly a mind wizard, which makes every video and tweet from him a very transparent and entertaining battle between reality and ego.
Have you noticed that the big news drops, I think it was Friday, on how good the economy is, and then the president just sort of went quiet? He's just letting it hang, right? The economic news is so big and so good for him, he just puts it out there, and then he just backs up into the shadows. You don't really realize how good he is at this until you look at the negative space. You have to look at what he doesn't do as well as what he does to get the full picture.
Yes, of course. You see, plebs, it's the tweets Trump doesn't make that you need to pay attention to. Like jizz. By the way, that video where he praises Trump for not rage tweeting and says it's a strategy happened on July 29th of 2018. Mere hours before the president rage tweeted for the rest of the day. The exact opposite thing Scott said he was doing. But that is just the kind of hilarious wrong Scott is. He makes predictions based on his seminar wisdom, is usually wrong, and then ignores anyone who might later point that out. You know, like a true master persuader. So when the good brain president pondered about injecting disinfectant, Adams was obviously one of the first to argue that actually he was being very smart, and gee whiz, did he use every single strategy we've mentioned. Like a grifter Voltron, he combined semantics, diversion, and just batshit fantasy into an entire day of tweets. First, he focused on the wrong thing, tweeting about how our very smart president was actually aware of experimental UV light treatments and was actually very smart. Then, when people pointed out the part about disinfectant injecting, Scott beautifully switched over to the semantic argument by saying, geez, how dumb are people to think he was talking about bleach or isopropyl alcohol specifically, geez, you people, even though he was literally referring to a guy talking about bleach and isopropyl alcohol. So now he has established that he thinks Trump wasn't talking about chemical cleaners and is actually a very smart boy indeed. He's all in, pot committed on the idea that Trump will come out and say that he was misunderstood, or that the fake news twisted his words, or some other kind of excuse. But then came that beautiful moment. The moment where Trump said that yes, he was in fact suggesting the injection of chemicals, but was being sarcastic to trick everyone. That wonderful gift that blew up everything Scott Adams was saying up until this point. But, being a master persuader, he reached into the old bag of tricks, or ball sack of lies if you'd rather, and pulled out a complete rewrite of reality, completing the trifecta and assuming a totally new meaning to Trump's words and saying that he was actually being sarcastic about saying he was sarcastic. You see, folks? It's all just a part of his 3D chess that conveniently allows Scott to not have to admit he was wrong about anything. Ego saved. Let's all move on. It's just absolutely incredible to watch a person short circuit that badly. And not just any person, but a person who loves to talk about Trump derangement syndrome while ironically maintaining a high-tech force field of denial about a very obvious grifter president.
Even the anti-Trumpers are using the phrase Trump derangement syndrome. Have you noticed that? Now, they're usually using it somewhat defensively, as in, we don't have that, or we're being blamed to that. But it feels like both the left and the right are talking about Trump derangement syndrome as though it's just a real, well, not as though, that it is a real thing. It has an actual medical diagnostic quality to it, and that there are millions of people suffering from it. That feels to be now medically demonstrated. Scientifically, if you will, without the controlled experiments. I don't mean that.
Yes, a lot of people are talking about how Trump derangement syndrome isn't really a thing, so that makes it definitely real in a medical and scientific way. But not like with experiments and data, of course. Scott, you need to, talk to someone. Anyway, good luck, bud. But he's sort of right about one very tiny thing. And that's the idea that the left experiences a form of denial or rejection of reality when it comes to dealing with Trump. Not the kind that Dogbutt or Dildo Guy or whoever was talking about, but rather a much more dangerous and common reaction to whenever Trump blasts hazardous hogwash from his chin hole. A reaction that, I would argue, is at least kind of-ish, equal-ish to the denial that happens on the right. And that is the constant and tragic assumption that something Trump will say or do will finally ruin his political career. That by pondering the drinking of bleach, Trump will actually lose his supporters. That this time, this is the thing that does it. Forget about the racism or the admitting to sexual assault or the fact that he was impeached or the kids being kept in cages or all the other blatantly bad things he's done as president. This one is the final straw, the tipping point. We'll all look back on and be like, yep, he sure went too far there. Yes, sirree, this is when America questioned whether he is fit to be president. And now conservatives will all be like, our bad. Sorry, we'll go back to normal now. As if all of a sudden, Trump supporters and conservatives will be super good at admitting they were wrong and not double down or deny reality. Something just this video alone has made a pretty good case for not happening. This incredibly naive idea that there is somehow a world where the GOP can make a graceful return to normalcy, while cute for the optimism, is very delusional. And I get it. I get that everyone is hoping that they'll wake up one day and read the news and learn that all those people believing in QAnon and deep state conspiracies and all the Scott Adamses, that they'll suddenly snap back to normal. But they won't. Everything they've done, all the bridges they've burned, their entire identity, and sometimes lucrative book deal about f***ing persuasion. It's all dangling on the idea that Trump is actually a good president. Which he definitely isn't. And there's just no easy pathway back from that. They're like Anakin Skywalker after he force-choked his pregnant wife to death because he joined the Sith to save his pregnant wife. You f***ing idiot, Anakin! At what point in the wife choking did you perhaps realize that this is gonna not save your wife? Or did that never occur to you, Anakin? But seriously, it's exactly like that. Because of how stupid it is. And like, how it seems like it was really lazily written. We don't talk about it nearly enough. But that's going to be a really big problem. One that I don't have a solution to. But boy, pretending like the Bleach comments are gonna be the big thing that does it, or that electing someone else will get us back to normal, or that the country was even normal before Trump. That's just as desperate and delusional as pretending Trump is some kind of secret genius who didn't totally wonder out loud if you could inject bleach into your veins to kill the bad, sick bugs. A thing he really did do, which is just so stupid, because everyone knows the only thing that will cure this thing is the power of Jesus Christ in your heart. Isn't that right, Reverend? God damn it, future you already made the character in After Effects. What do you want? You want me to apologize? I f***ing won't. I will eat a whole bag of raw meat and make you shit blood and show you who's in charge. Past Cody rules. Yeah, it does. Take this, future Cody. Ow. Hi, thanks so much for watching to the end of the video, which is now. Be sure to YouTube it up with the likes and the subscribing, and check out our podcast, which is called Even More News. And we've got a patreon.com/somemorenews and t-shirt stuff, all that kind of jazz. You're welcome for taking down Trump once and for all. We did it. Ha 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 ha! All right, see ya.